Christian workshop on this hot sunny evening. I'm delighted to say we've got Buff here, who's going to be talking to us about running carbon literacy course, in the hopes that some of you here might be happy to take that up and do it yourself and do the training yourself. So we'll start, though, as we always do, with a prayer. So Catherine, would you please start us off with a prayer from adapted from one of Christian Aid's?
Creator God, you have created us and the world because you are love. The world is hurting through climate change, and it is our carbon footprints that make a difference. God, change our world, our communities, and us with your love. And help us to learn this evening from Buff on how we can take practical steps to understand and reduce our carbon footprint. And so help us to love others and all of creation, so that your world can be what you want it to be. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Catherine. Well, I'd like to introduce Buff. If Catherine could get her to join me on the screen, that would be great. Buff is the Diocesan Environment Officer for my own diocese, the Chichester Diocese. And the Chichester Diocese has been a little bit lackluster, shall we say, in getting on board with environmental issues. Yonks ago, I was part of a team that got them to sign up to an environmental statement of intent and a policy, but things went very quiet. But Buff has arrived, like sweeping with a new broom, and is really causing ripples. So I'm delighted to have her here with us tonight. She's been particularly concentrating on encouraging churches and groups to get into this carbon literacy course. So Buff, without any more ado, I'm going to hand over to you now. And Buff's going to talk for about 20 minutes on telling us about the course. And then she's going to have another 10 minutes or so with some technical things. And then we'll have our usual breakout rooms for 15 minutes. And we'll come back for questions and answers. So Buff, over to you.
Great. Fantastic to be with you. I find Green Christian really inspirational, and it's really good to meet a whole range of people I never normally see. I'm unapologetically Church of England, so I'm going to share my screen in a moment with a presentation about what carbon literacy is and what the Church of England is doing about it. So I hope that's helpful. So here we go. So carbon literacy, what it is, what the Church of England is doing about it. This is a definition that comes in from the carbon literacy website itself. So carbon literacy is an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. Or put a bit more simply, understanding what I actually need to do, where I can get help to do it, actually doing it and seeing what I've done. So it's more than just an education, of course, giving facts. There's several aspects that I think are really helpfully unique to carbon literacy courses. One is it's for individuals to do, but we're motivated to commit to an action at the end of it, which will be an individual action, but also one that we do within our community. So if we're doing this through a workplace scheme, it might be at work, education establishment, it will be at our place of learning, or a community group such as a faith group, a church. So yes, it's about individuals, but it's about working together within our communities. And also it's tailored to particular organisations. So there is a brand of carbon literacy training for Christian congregations, for the Church of England, for higher education, for parts of the NHS. So it takes the facts and the science and it puts them in a wrapper, in a shape that relates directly to people's real experience. And I think that's very helpful. This is a slide that comes from the Carbon Literacy Project, really saying who they are and what they do. Climate change, carbon footprints, how you can do your bit, why it's relevant to you and your audience. And then it's something about who they are in terms of their own promotion and uniqueness, recognition, etc. But really interesting that they are more than just facts and figures. it's about action, and it's about action in community. Those who live, those who work, and those who study. So that's the carbon literacy project talking about itself. And this next slide, every time that we run a course, particularly one of the online courses, this infographic gets updated every month of how many people have done the course and got the certificate at the end, because obviously you can do the course and not get the certificate. How many tons of carbon are saved, how many courses for different situations have been designed, and so on and so forth. So they always ask us to show the updated infographic, just saying this is gathering momentum all the time. So this is the resources that are available through the Church of England. So it's part of the Net Zero Carbon Programme. If you want to look up what the Church of England is doing generally, there's a really good environment programme. It's on the Church of England main website, but it's really frustrating because you have to kind of, every time I want to find the environment page, I have to put it in the search and it all comes up. Now, these resources aren't on that, but it's that environment programme led by a lady called Jo Chamberlain, who's got involved with partnering with carbon literacy and getting this stuff going. So the particular resources are available. There's a presentation called Carbon Confidence in an Hour. It's really a special dispensation from the Carbon Literacy Project that we've got this, because it doesn't require anyone to make any pledges or commit to any actions. It is what it says on the tin. It's about giving people confidence to start talking about carbon. And it says it's an hour. There's definitely an hour's worth of presentation material. You know, it's a slideshow. There's a bit of chit chat and discussion. There's a vision exercise. But I've done it in 15 to 20 minutes because that's all the Deanery Synod would give me to speak on. But it's a really useful tool if someone says, oh, could you just say something? And you think, right, I'm going to give you this. But then there are specific carbon literacy courses for the Church of England, which are, if you like, the proper course, that are the ones that cover more ground in more depth and do have the content within them that the Carbon Literacy Project requires for someone to make a pledge to do an action. And so if you submit your form at the end with this is what I'm going to do, they don't check up whether you've done it or not, but if you commit to do it in enough depth, they will say, yes, you're certified. We understand you've done the learning, you've shown that you've learnt enough, and you're committed to do something. And you can do that as an online course or as a small group in-person course. And then there, on top of that, the Church of England run Train the Trainers courses. So someone like myself who's made it my business to really roll this out across our diocese, I've also done a training course for trainers, which again is a bit more in-depth, another step along the road. So sort of 3 levels of resource: carbon confidence in an hour, the online or in-person courses, and training course. So what I thought we'd just do is have a kind of bird's eye view of what's in the carbon confidence course in an hour, because you don't actually have to have done a Train the Trainer course to do this. It's probably helpful if you get in touch with carbon literacy. They'll give you some time, an hour and a half, just to talk you through the kind of nuts and bolts, help you answer difficult questions, explain who they are. But anyone can do this. Any opportunity. It says staff on it because originally it was aimed at diocesan staff. There's also one for senior staff or bishops. I've used the staff version a lot. The difference between that and the bishops is they have a few more talking head videos from bishops in the bishop one. I've not got to any bishops yet. So this is the outline. Talks about missional context. That's really important about communicating about climate, is to make that connection with the values of people in the room in front of you. There's lots of research that says that's really what makes the difference. So for a Church of England course, talking about missional content, really missional context, really important. There's a bit of science, a bit about climate justice, a bit about what's happening in the diocese or area that you're in, some case studies, and then helping people to envision, to have a view of the future. So if I was talking to you, if you were a deanery synod, which I've done many times, and I was setting out my missional context, this is what I would do. So the danger is this turns me into a preacher again. And I also tell bad jokes. So I'd probably start by saying the trouble with the marks of mission is that the one that says to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation comes at the end. It seems to be like number 5 of a list of 5. So the environment becomes an issue that is somewhere off to the left field for those people who've got beards and like compost. But then I'll go on to explain that the 5 marks of mission that Anglicans are committed to are integral to the care of creation. If we're proclaiming the good news, we proclaim into a context. The context is climate breakdown and ecological collapse. If we're teaching people to follow Jesus, to be new believers, we're teaching them to live in that context. How should we then live and love God's good creation? How to respond to the endless human need created by the climate crisis? And how particularly do we seek to transform unjust structures? So we find that care of creation is in everything that we're called to do as Anglicans. This is the summary slide of the science. Very straightforward. It's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, we can fix it. And great slide because it's very visual and clear and memorable. And then there's a bit about carbon, about climate justice. The richest 10% are responsible for 50% of the emissions. And in between all these slides, there's more meat on the bones here. I'm just giving you the kind of headlines of the sections. But again, these are the memorable slides that really fix in people's minds. And then there's this visioning exercise. So after climate justice, there's a bit more talking about, well, what's your diocese doing? Have we got some examples we can share with each other? You know, what do you know about? But one of the really important bits is getting people to think about a future that is different. You know, if we want a good green future, what does that actually look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? You know, how hot is it? And then you say to people, well, how do we get there? But to get them in that headspace that they've projected forward 20 years and say, actually, you know, we've done what we need to do. You know, what does that feel like? Because one of the things about communicating about the climate crisis is that not only do we need to connect with people's values, but we need to give them a vision of the future that is something that they want. So they need to buy into that. Then that's information about the carbon literacy course. This would be the online course, would be 8 hours of learning. It is accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project. It is specifically written for the Church of England, and those are the facts and figures about the learners. So that will be my last slide on a carbon literacy, carbon confidence presentation, just saying you can come and join me, and you can see a picture of happy people with their certificates, and then it's not very clear on my screen, but that's the certificate you get with your name on it. So that's what carbon confidence does. Can be squeezed into, you know, 15, 20 minutes. It's an hour's worth of material giving the headlines, but it doesn't ask a commitment from anybody. They don't get a certificate. It's your kind of starter for 10. So this is a bit more detail about the online course. So that's designed to be run by someone who's done some training, and it's quite intense. It's 6 hours online of 3 2-hour sessions. It's very well laid out and scripted. So you get the slides and you get the scripts and you get the timing and you get the coffee break put in. There's a bit of homework at the beginning, watching a David Attenborough documentary. And then there's some homework at the end of each session. In order to get your certificate at the end, not only do you have to do it all, but you submit your pledges. You fill in an online form that says, this is what I've understood about the course. They give you some questions, and these are the actions I plan to do. And it's an action both as an individual, but also within your context, within your community, whether that a church, your workplace, your school or educational establishment. So it's both individual stuff and group stuff. So this is just a really quick look at the kind of syllabus of the online course. So session 1, it's the left-hand side of my screen, a little bit of theology. At this point, I ought to point out that carbon literacy courses are what they say on their tin. They are about carbon. So the theology is there, but it's brief and at the beginning. This is not something that is going to teach you how to pray. It may well impact your prayer life as we get to grips with the facts and figures of the science and the justice, but it's not primarily a spirituality course, and it's not particularly biblically in depth. But it is there, and it's aimed at Christians. So session 1 has a little bit of theology at the beginning, and some of that is video of someone talking about biblical references, or Bishop Graham Usher has a video. He's the lead bishop in the Church of England on the environment. Some more of the science, again, more in depth, more information than there is in the Carbon Confidence Hour, more on climate justice, and then introducing people to the idea of their individual carbon footprints. And then we go away with some homework, Britain's Talks Climate, and talking about Eco Church Awards, and a bit of a questionnaire. And then you can see session 2 is a bit more personal, about carbon footprints and looking at stuff and travel and food and buildings. And section 3 is about effects and a bit more about communication. And again, there is homework to be done. So again, the first session starts with the 5 marks of mission that I've already talked about, and how that is integral to our response to the climate crisis. And then this is an example of just one of the different sorts of slides. That's an atmospheric carbon dioxide parts per million slide. From the prehistoric era, we can get that from ice cores up to the industrial era, as we all know, it's shooting up exponentially. And you can see from this slide that the data goes to January 2017, which of course is quite a long time ago. And they do update the slides, but I think because this is such a long time span on this one, we get the idea without having to have another dot for our current time. Section 2, looking at our own carbon footprints in terms of stuff, things we have or own or buy, travel. And some of this is split up even on the online course into sort of a quiz or a discussion. So it's not just someone talking at us. There's a bit of interaction and breakout groups. And session 3, so you come back for your third lot of 2 hours, talking about the impacts. But actually, there's a really helpful section in session 3 about communicating about climate change. And there's an organisation called Britain Talks Climate, who've looked at the population in terms of their values, the things that matter to them, what connects with them. Because there's quite a lot of research about what it is we need to say, what we need to find out about somebody, what aspect of the climate and nature crisis is going to be meaningful for them. So I might want to talk about not flying or net zero, and immediately that might completely shut off someone. You know, they're just not going to be interested. Whereas if I talk about the quality of the water in their local river, what's washing up on the beach, the air quality near where they live, they might be much more engaged. And the evidence again shows that if you can get people engaged on one thing, it helps them move on to the next. So there's quite a lot of session 3 talking about how to communicate about climate. So that's Britain Talks Climate. So Climate Outreach is another organisation who've done the research. Really helpful, identifying 7 segments of the UK public Again, it's all the business of connecting with people's core beliefs. Understanding how the British public think and feel allows us to draw upon shared values. So we're always about what builds a bridge, what can we find that we've got a connection about that helps draw people towards climate action. And those are some of the suggestions about actions. Banking, investment, political engagement. So this wouldn't be the first topic we do on the high street if we listen to Britain Talks Climate, but this is the actions that we know when we're engaged really make a difference. And again, there's a bit in there about vision and a bit more about the resources to help us take the next step for ourselves and learn more. Now, this is a bit more hot off the press news. This is carbon literacy for Christian congregations. So there's a real understanding between the Church of England and the Carbon Literacy Project that Christian congregations meet in small groups. That's what they do across the denominations. So this is clearly aimed at Christian congregations, not because we don't think other congregations matter. It's just the Church of England has led on this, so it's particularly sort of tailored for our corner of the market, if you like. So it's not particularly aimed at people from an Anglican background, and it's the same kind of material as the online course, but it's divided into 5 1.5-hour sessions. So probably as a small group, that's 2-hour sessions by the time everybody's had a chit chat and a cup of coffee. It's the same syllabus, if you like, but realizing that actually if we're together in the same room, there's more human interaction, less kind of just plowing through it in the way that I'm doing it tonight. And the really good news about this is that also there's the understanding that when we lead a small group, we're often not teaching other people what to do, but we're learning together alongside each other. So if someone wanted to lead this kind of this variety of the carbon literacy, then the Carbon Literacy Project are saying, well, actually, just engage with us, come and have a session for an hour and a half, so we can, make sure you understand about the Carbon Literacy Project, you know a bit about what you're doing, and we can support you in that. But you don't have to do a full Train the Trainers course, which you might want to do anyway for your own understanding. I've done one because I'm the Diocesan Environment Officer. But if you simply want to take Carbon Literacy for Christian congregations, 5 1.5-hour sessions of interaction, you can do that, and it will be available on their website from September, and we'll get more information about that to everybody who's interested. I had this information yesterday, so it's coming in September, rather than I've actually got a web link for you right now. And the Train the Trainer course is really for people who want to commit themselves to kind of rolling this out in their context, not just, well, I'll do one small group course for Lent or for Advent or for Season of Creation, but want to take things a bit more in depth. So someone like myself who's obviously doing this a lot across the diocese, that's the kind of thing I've done. And that's, again, 3 2-hour sessions, and the Church of England settings are dates in September. So I feel like I've talked without breathing at all for the last 20 minutes. I'm just going to stop my share and say, if you want to take the spotlight off me. And then that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, just going, this is what's out there. I know we're going to go to breakout rooms in a little while, 10 minutes or so, or whenever suits us. But I thought I'd just sort of say, any immediate sort of reactions or questions to that? I know some people need a bit of time to think. That's why we put you in breakout rooms, so you can have a bit more of a chat about it. But if there was anything people wanted to ask you immediately, if you wave at me with your electronic or actual hand. So Fanny, I can see you waving at me.
So sorry, I literally registered to this course two days ago, so I've got no idea whether I had the right or not. So I'm here. I'm attending a church. It's the Baptist Union Church in Cheshire, and I've been running carbon literacy course in my workplace in the automotive industry. So and I have been training people, so I know a lot about the automotive thing.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about maybe doing something like that for my church or the churches together in Nantwich. We've got an Anglican, Methodist, Elim church, so we're quite active. So just first question is, this material that you mentioned, is that something that we could just have freely, like, is it freely available for us, or would we have to pay to have access to it, or?
Good question. So I think if you are part of the Church of England, or you've got a church that's part of the Church of England, you can just get hold of it. You probably need to go through your Diocesan Environment Officer,
Okay.
if you know
Yeah.
who that is. The cost, good question, Fanny, didn't say this, that in order to get your certificate, it's £10. Now, depending on your situation or your diocese, they may pay it. In our diocese, I've promised that I will extract the £10 off people and get them to pay it to the diocese. And then I've got an arrangement that Carbon Literacy Project would bill my diocese. What they don't want to do is have a situation where the Carbon Literacy Project is chasing £10 out of this little church here and that little church there. That's just, so there will be an arrangement within your diocese. So you need to go through whoever's in charge of the environment programme within your diocese, probably to get the materials, but certainly to collect the money to give to the Carbon Literacy Project when people do pledges.
Okay, but the course content itself would be then freely available if we go to the Church of England.
Yeah, should be. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
And the course for congregations should just be on the Carbon Literacy website, I think, in September. That was the hot news yesterday.
Okay, well, I'll have a look then in September.
Sorry. On the top of my screen, I've got Stuart with your hand up. Hi, Stuart.
Yes, hi, and thanks very much, Muff. Just, well, a couple of questions. I'm interested in this new course, the Carbon Literacy for Christian Congregations, and I just wondered, because it sounds, if you're in a small group, like it's a sort of informal setting. I'm just wondering if you've had a look at the kind of materials that you would use. I mean, I've done a number of courses like the online one that run by Winchester and Oxford. I'm part of the Oxford Diocese, and that, which was great. I mean, we had obviously online discussion and all the rest. But I'm just wondering about the sort of the format for the whether, for example, it would be PowerPoint slides. I mean, which doesn't seem quite like the format. So it's more just if you know about the kind of the format and the type of materials. Because certainly I think there are people who I can think of locally in Milton Keynes who would kind of quite like that, and yeah, so we can sort of see that there would be an audience for that. And then the second question was just really if you could sort of give an idea of the kind of impact that these courses have had, and the sorts of things that have been beneficial, that what has led to things to move forward, because I could envisage that a lot of these are all interesting, but they could just sort of stay with an individual pledge. And so it's particularly trying to sort of monitor, evaluate indeed the kind of the collective, where you've got an organizational commitment and follow-up, and how that's done. And I mean, I convene the Milton Keynes Eco Church Network, and we've got 20 churches. So I kind of feed stuff through that sort of network, where we've got a range of different interests, but and we can try and assess that way. But I'm just curious to how it's evaluated.
Well, let me try and do the first part of that. So Carbon Literacy for Christian Congregations, you get sent the stuff online. You get a leader's handbook, so you can print that off. And then you get workbooks, which are basically the course material that participants will need. So they get, A4, if that's what you print off on your printer, booklet that they work through. So they've got a physical thing in their hand. There are games and quizzes, which you could do online. You know, you could put the quiz up on a television screen if you've got a smart telly in the lounge you're meeting in, or you could print all the stuff off. And so I ran one in March, in the small room in our church, and I did some of it projected on the wall, and I printed some stuff off, and each participant got their own booklet, and I had a leader's handbook. So it's a mixture of all those things. And the question about evaluation, now I think you're asking me quite an in-depth question, Stuart, that I probably don't know a proper answer to. But the point of the pledges is people take action, and the infographic, that sort of blue square, which had lots of pictures and numbers on it, that's the flyover, if you like. That's the bird's eye view from carbon literacy of who's involved, how much carbon we think overall would be reduced if people act on their pledges. And I think the point is, it's yes, what I'm going to do personally, but it's much more as well about what we are going to do together. So how you quantify that, I think that's really a big question. I don't think I know the answer to it. But in terms of impact, it's not just about me in my little box. It's about how do we do this together. And I think that's something that's really important. I'm just going to move us on, if that's okay, Stuart. I realise that I don't really properly answer your question.
That's okay.
Sophie, you've got your hand up. Hi, Sophie. We can't hear. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I'm very interested with that course. I would like to introduce it to the Methodist Church, though. So how do we go about? Do we have to pay for it, or?
That's a really good question. So I think the carbon literacy for congregations will be available on the Carbon Literacy Project website in September. And the payment is, if you want your certificate and you do your pledges and you get them approved, it's 10 quid to get your certificate. So I think that's where the money's involved. The other stuff, really good question, and I didn't do my homework properly because I'm so Church of England, is that I know where we get it from, but there's a memorandum of understanding between the Church of England and the Carbon Literacy Project. So you will have a green ambassador or a green apostle or something like that within
well, probably.
Yeah. So it may be, talk to your Anglican colleague and say, well, what do we do? We're Methodists, and they might know. Or talk to the Carbon Literacy Project directly. But the Carbon Literacy for Christian congregations, that bit of the course will be on their website. That's what I was told yesterday.
But
but the rest of it.
Now it's really via the Church of England.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Robbie.
Thanks. Well, that's really inspirational. I'd love to run a carbon literacy course myself, but what if I disagree fundamentally with one of the things? What's the protocol for the carbon literacy work and me doing it in my own way? So my particular bugbear with a lot of this stuff is the false hope thing. So you had your slide, it said, yes, it's us, yes, it's bad, ... we can fix it. I tend to the Rupert Reed and Jem Pendell school of, this civilization is finished and all we can do is create a softer landing rather than a just totally crash over the cliff kind of thing. So if I was to run it, I wouldn't feel comfortable about this sort of false hope that we can fix it, but I would love to do the rest of it. How would that work?
I think that's probably a question for carbon literacy, to be honest, because I think it would depend on how we frame that hope, because I'm naturally an optimistic person, but I say to people, my favorite Pope Francis quote is, this is hope, the future is in God's hands. And then I go, which doesn't mean we don't have to do anything, because we so do, but it means ultimately there is an ultimate future. We have a place we're aiming for, and that's a hope in heaven, which for me says we've got somewhere where we're going. We're not all doomed and this life is pointless. So I think that's the kind of existential thing that I want to say about hope. So I think if you're going to use carbon literacy material, they do encourage people, even if it's carbon literacy for congregations, which will be available on their website, to get on and talk to them. And what I heard yesterday is they're quite happy to see people in it as individuals or small groups, you know, a phone call or a Zoom call, so that you can say that kind of thing and check it out. I think what they don't want to do is have people use their material badly. I mean, they don't check up. No one's come and inspected me. But you can't, you know, I've been on a session with them and they just say, you know, this is who we are. This is what we're aiming for. You know, this is why we ask people to make pledges. It's all around that kind of thing. Okay. But good question. Catherine.
Thanks, Buff. So interesting. Just to add to the little bit that you said about pledges, when I did the carbon literacy for churches courses in Lent this year, they were talking then about making the carbon literacy for Christian congregations very similar, as you've said. And when we did the pledges, as you've said, they tried to make them into collective pledges. So I made 2 pledges. One was my personal pledge and the other was the collective one. And there was, just to add to what you said, there was a little bit of quantifying. So one pledge could be to hold the carbon literacy course. Well, that doesn't directly immediately impact our carbon footprint, but actually if we change our heating system, or we start having plant-based meals, that can, and it's possible to quantify the degree of that a little bit, to project that in terms of tons or even kilotons of carbon. And altering transport to church could be another one, as you say, in one of the areas that you've talked about: food stuff, transport, buildings. So they help us a little bit with that quantifying.
Yeah, they do say, you know, how many tons of carbon are you going to save by doing this? And it's
that's right, yes.
Low, medium or high. So they don't give you a kind of, well, you're good and you're rubbish. They just want people to engage with the fact of, what does this actually do? What difference does this actually make? So nobody, they don't mark your homework. They don't come around to your house and check it out. But in terms of submitting a pledge or an action, they want to see that when you write something on your form, that you've got some evidence that you've understood and understood the quantity of carbon you're aiming to reduce.
Which I found a really helpful part of the course to think about, to show that evidence of understanding.
Yeah, I got my form. I sent my form to Jo Chamberlain for checking, because we were kind of guinea pigs, and I got mine turned down because she said, Buff, that's your job. You've just written down what your job is. We need to know what else you're going to do. I'm like, oh right, yeah, I kind of get that now. I haven't checked the chat. I don't know if anyone's got an eye on the chat and wants to highlight anything, or
nothing much is coming on that.
that's great.
So
are we at a stage where it would be sensible to send you guys off into breakout rooms and you can have a talk about what's, you know, the things that matter to you? Is that good?
Okay. So we came up with a couple of questions for you to think about in the breakout rooms. One is, what else do you need to know? Now, you've already had an opportunity for some of you to come in with some questions, but not everybody has come in. So, or in a small breakout room, chance to talk about what else you think you need to know if you were to think about doing either taking one of these courses or leading one. And what problems can you foresee in your own church situation? So what problems might you have to overcome if you try to do this in your own church? Welcome back. So if you've got a question or something you want to contribute, then please put either your virtual hand up or wave a hand. I'm just going to come in very quickly. We had it was a long story, but a heartfelt story in the breakout group I was in with Jay, of having new electric heating put in, which is much better on cost, but has been in its first winter, the church was still cold. They've also got Herschel heaters, but they've done the right thing. They've gone back to their advisors, who've advised that there are certain things that weren't quite right and have adjusted things. So they're now going to have a see how it works in the following winter. But I think the moral of that story is, when we go into this sort of situation, do things. They won't all work. They may not work to start with, but keep getting advice and keep striving and celebrate the carbon that you have saved, Jay. Right, let's see whose hand is up first. Catherine, your hand is up. Do you want to come in? And then I'll hand over to you, Buff. You carry on now, Buff, and organise this. All right.
Thanks. Buff, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the visioning exercise.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you just had a couple of examples and whether when you've done that, it's varied a lot according to the group and the type of church.
Yeah, and I think it works for some people, really works for them. So a couple of stories. So you say, okay, you know, if I've got people in a room, I get them to physically do it. It works better, I think, physically than online, but hey, we've got to go with what we've got. So if I'm in a room, I say, right, let's everybody down this end of the room. We're going to get in our time machines. We're going to walk up the other side of the room, and we are 2050. And somebody said they did it with one group of people, and someone immediately burst into tears and went, I'm going to be dead. And you're like, no, you're the same age when you get out of your time machine. So there's some things that just don't work for people. And some people, the kind of getting lost in your head thing, they don't do that either. It doesn't work. But for some people, it's the most powerful bit. So our friend Jo Chamberlain, who heads up the environment program, she says, oh no, this is my favorite bit. Because when people start to go, I can hear the birds singing. And you go, well, what do we need to do to make the birds sing in 20 years' time? That's what we need to do now. And then people make that connection. There's some more research, I think, came out of the University of Derby about we care about nature when, first of all, we get out there and experience it. But when we have an emotional connection, when it becomes our bit of park, the birds I know about, then we're much more likely to get action. So again, the visioning exercise, yeah, it works better with some groups of people than others, but for some people, it's that really powerful emotional connection when they can imagine something better.
Yeah, thanks. I think the Natural History Museum has capitalised on this a bit. In their recent exhibition, perhaps last year, What Have We Done to Birds? Ends with that sort of immersive experience right at the end of the exhibition. You just sit in a room and it's been imagined for you, but you see green and blue and you hear birds and then you can respond because your senses are involved. So
Yeah,
thank
so it's
you.
you know, because there's quite a lot of facts and figures and graphs. So it's trying to get another bit of your brain
Yeah.
involved, which is really important.
There's a
Anybody else got something?
question from Liz Spencer in the chat. Liz, do you want to ask it?
Can't-
Yes, the carbon course for congregations, which is coming on stream in September, is that effectively the same as what is currently available as the Church of England course?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I mean, I haven't seen it because we haven't, you know, we thought we were going to get it yesterday, but they said, no, it's September. It'll be launched September. So I think it's essentially the same as that's available now, but it's just becoming much easier to get hold of directly from the Carbon Literacy
Which
Project.
is kind of in relation to a question that came up in our breakout group, which is we weren't clear exactly how you would access the course now. I mean, I had a quick look at the website and you seem to be able to register as an individual, as a group. I didn't actually do it, didn't have time to go explore further. Do you have to go through your diocesan officer?
I think you probably do, as I say, because it's quite a big step forward that it's just going to be freely available on their website. So I think at the moment, you probably have to go through someone like me. Do you know how to get hold of your Diocesan Environment Officer?
We do now have one.
Good.
I'm sure I can, yes, phone the diocese, but yes. Yeah, a couple of months ago we had one appointed.
Okay, I can see a row of hands, so I'm just going to go across the top of my screen. So Joe McMullen, you've got your hand up.
Hi. I just wanted, one of the key points of the discussion in the group I was in was that we find we're really struggling to find that one thing that engages more people within the congregation. There's either a very small group or even one person, for example, who would be working, say, on eco-church or just trying to raise the profile of sustainability. And you can put things to the PCC, to the congregation, and there's okay, that's fine, but it doesn't become action. They don't deal with the waste or the not using disposable stuff in the same way as you might hope they would. So I'm just wondering if anybody out there had something that they had done that really broke through to their congregation and started that little bit of engagement that, you know, could be the first step. And if anybody's got anything, that would be great to hear.
That's a really good question. I mean, I can answer for myself is that it was when I got the moments to pray and think about this and went to a really good conference. Our diocese had a conference and I was completely convicted by the science, and that was 3 years ago, and compelled as a Christian on the acts of justice. So I think from my point of view, it's just keeping banging the drum. But other people, and what we might do is because there's now a row of hands, I might go down the row of hands and we'll see if any of them answer your question. And if not, we'll open it up. So hang on to your question, Joe. You know, what works, what engages with people? We're not ignoring it. We'll just kind of see if the answers emerge.
Thank you.
So Clive, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, actually, it's a similar sort of question in our little breakout room, is how to engage with someone who's a total eco-skeptic. We have 2 members of the congregation who think the whole thing's a load of whatever, and you can tell them all the facts and things, but they kind of, it's difficult to engage with them. So some help on that would be appreciated, maybe.
So
yeah.
Again, there's some really good research about communicating about climate, and the kind of hardcore deniers, I'm going to say it's 10 or 20%. It's less than 20% off the top of my head. So I think the advice, as I've understand it, and I'll look around the room for someone to frantically say this isn't true, is to actually not ignore them, but don't waste the energy there. Because actually the way that change will happen is getting people who are a bit more ambivalent, a bit more on the fence, or a bit more willing to do stuff, and creating that momentum. And then the people who are basically in denial become, you know, the culture around them changes. So rather than wasting time and energy and getting people very hot under the collar, confronting folk directly, work on those who have got the capacity to change, who've got some engagement, and build momentum. I think that's what I've learned.
Thank you.
Yes, Catherine Hayhoe, Claire DeMott, thank you. Catherine Hayhoe is a saint and also brilliant and readable. And someone else was saying, Mike Berners-Lee, what's so bad about bananas? That's really good about carbon footprints and understanding sort of the nuts and bolts of carbon. But Catherine Hayhoe on communicating about climate, books, TED Talks, everything, email, do it. She's fantastic. Neroli. Hi, Neroli.
Hello, Buff. My question is, who is the carbon literacy course aimed at? Would you suggest like trying to encourage all the staff at the church or all the PCC to go on it?
Yeah, I haven't managed that in my church, but yes. I mean, I got to go to your church actually and do the whole diocesan staff. I got half an hour on the diocesan away day, which was brilliant. But actually, again, about communication, I think it's always who is willing to come.
Okay.
And, you know, so it's not about your role in church. The reason it's aimed at diocesan staff is the Church of England trying to change culture within diocese.
Okay.
Thank
you.
So yeah, if you get your PCC on it, I've done, you know, a PCC away day. I was going to say it was a quiet day, and my husband said, "Why did they put you on a quiet day?"
It's charming.
Charming. But yeah, so it works for PCC away day. It works for Deanery Synod. It works for anybody who will let you do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Stuart, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say just some suggestions about sort of how to get around the 1 or 2 people, and yes, and sort of motivate. And you know, this comes from across sort of 20 churches in Milton Keynes as they've sort of rolled along, and indeed getting a network of people together is really helpful. So if you have people in a benefice, several churches, then they can help one another out, and they can build up the confidence. Secondly, leaders are critical. Constantly having care for creation preached within prayers on a regular weekly basis. I almost sort of sit there and monitor just how many times various ministers actually just mention those words. Unfortunately, we have ministers who do that. I mean, thirdly, and this kind of we got us talking in our group about how you pitch carbon literacy, which sounds a bit technical. I mean, as does Eco Church, which is why I tend to talk about care for creation, but still the fact that there's within Eco Church 5 whole areas. And so someone may not be particularly interested in buildings and insulation or solar panels, but they might be interested in gardening, in bird watching, in Messy Church. And so it's trying to really say that there are areas of interest for everyone to get involved. Fourthly, build on personal stories. Our church is now probably sort of 50% Black church, and so when we talk about it, we talk about how it affects everyone's family, not just here in Milton Keynes, but across the world. And it's amazing when you get those conversations in small groups, just how much commonality there is when you're concerned about food insecurity or flooding. And then finally, also, it's really critical that it is theologically based, and you keep coming back to the fact that we are committed as stewards to look after God's great beautiful world and cosmos, and and if we don't get out and appreciate it, then we're not going to look after it. A whole kind of range of different ways that, and those are collective experiences across the network.
So just highlighting, find your allies, and they might not be in your church, they might be somewhere else. Listening and telling stories. And again, there's real research about that, telling the good news stories. We made this change and we had this difference, we did this thing, but also having the connection. And, if you've got a linked diocese, if you've got partners across the world, if you've got people with relatives, the real personal stories, this how it impacts a person we know or we love or we support. Preaching, praying, getting it in there. And if, you find that you're not having creation care particularly well preached at your church, getting someone else in might be a way forward, or having a joint service where, it's better communicated. So I hope that helps a bit, Jo.
Right.
Catherine.
Just before Catherine comes in, I'm just wondering, Claire wants to come in with them. I know you've had some experience with these carbon literacy courses, Claire. Is there anything you'd like to add or come in with?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem, I think all of these things are problems I've encountered. People don't have time, people don't have interest. I mean, I had somebody just going, can we just manicure all the lawns? We don't want to do a flower garden. It's like, well, that's basic. One of the things that I'm trying to set up at the moment is to do a climate change the facts film and do it as a churches together, and getting people in and then doing a little blurb at the end to just say, if you want to hear more and you'd like to know some of the things that you can do to kind of help towards this. What I was saying in our group is one of the things that we're finding is there's a lot of people push back because they're afraid and because they are feeling very much like they are incapacitated and can't do anything. And so one of the things that carbon literacy does really well is get together with people around you. Let's do this together. Let's pull together. In our course that I used to run, we did a lot on influence. And, if you could just influence your family, they'll influence people and that'll have a ripple effect. But I think what it does is it gives people some agency to feel like they do have some power, whether that is changing their bank account or lobbying the MP. There's lots of great actions that come out of that when people talk about it together. But, I've struggled a lot with, I've even got funding. So Carbon Literacy a couple of years ago had a community funding pot, and I got £600 out of them to run it. So I didn't even have to pay for certificates, and I still couldn't get anyone to do the course. So, it is just trying to get, and I think it starts with a few. You probably find You'll get one or two and it will sort of snowball from there. And the only thing I can say about climate deniers is something that I've learned is don't talk, just listen, because you'll find out what their issues really are, and try and find out what it is that drives them. So you can kind of tap into that, which is, I think, what you were all saying anyway about that Britain Talks Climate. But if you let them talk, they'll almost out themselves, if that makes sense. They'll touch on something that you'll kind of go, oh, I think that might be the actual issue here. That was all, but
Thank
yeah.
you, Claire.
I was going to say,
much.
my struggle is to just get other people to just come along, even to just get it started, but we'll get there.
Just quickly, I heard someone who got the David Attenborough film about oceans. So, you know, it's kind of going round sideways. It's like, because we all believe in David Attenborough. I mean, you know, you can't be British and not believe in David Attenborough. So, you know, what is a connection? A mate of mine was just said, well, we just got people in batches to come around and rub our house because it's on Amazon or whatever it was. So, yeah, maybe we go around sideways. Catherine, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, also on Joe's question. So similar to what Stuart said, but I think bite-sized chunks are really important. And I think also for people who have accepted the scientific facts but are not convinced we can do much about it. And then so if you think of Eco Church, which Joe mentioned when she asked the question, and the 5 questions, the 5 sections being worship and teaching, land, buildings, lifestyle and global engagement, you'll probably, if people have capacity, have one person in the church who is interested in one of those, in each of those. So then they could possibly take it forward if they have capacity. But similarly, as you've said, Buff, the sections that look at carbon footprint in the carbon literacy course also could have one person assigned to them. So food, travel, buildings, stuff. And have those personal conversations that you've also mentioned about how difference can be made in those in specific areas. And that leads into the hope, because we can't have wide global hope unless we have hope about making a difference in bite-sized chunks.
And again, I think I've heard that the research says that if we engage with one action of change, we're more likely to do the next one. So again, you know, it's not despairing of the day of small things, which is why we need a community around us. I mean, I'm involved in a bit of research at the minute. I'm part of the guinea pigs being researched on. I'm not an expert in climate grief and anxiety and sustaining hope. And again, I think, you know, this is an area in which Green Christian has a lot of expertise, but what I've picked up is that it's finding people that are on your side and on your team, finding those positive stories, you know, taking care of ourselves in all of this, because you know, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And keeping going is the most important thing. So sometimes when we feel like, well, I haven't done anything for a few weeks, that's okay, because we need to just keep going.
In Green Christian, we talk about walking and not being weary, as opposed to the rising up. The keeping going is tough, as you say.
Fantastic. We have about 3 minutes left before Barbara is going to just press the distract button on the Zoom.
There was a question from Paul Magnell. I think you said that the climate literacy for congregations is not yet out. This is a new thing, isn't it?
So the one that's going to be freely available on the Carbon Literacy Project website, it's September. So if you want it before then, I think you'll need to go through your Diocesan Environment Officer or contact a Carbon Literacy directly and ask them. But it's freely available on their website, but it's September.
That's why you can't find any links yet, Paul, I think.
So the links will be up. They said so yesterday, so we'll see.
Well, I think if we'll call a halt there. Buff, you've given us an absolutely magnificent whistle-stop tour through and then stirred a huge amount of really useful debate and questions and contributions. A huge thank you to you. And can we just give her a round of applause? Virtual, thank you. And Buff is going to close the session for us with a prayer. So Buff, over to you for a prayer. And then I'll just tell you about our next workshops. So. Thank you, Buff.
So let's pray. Father God, thank you that this is your great and beautiful and glorious world. And we cry out to you for your mercy for the mess we have made of it. And Lord, we pray that we would be faithful in the day of small things, in the weariness, in the frustration, and we would also tell the stories of hope and triumph when things change. Send your Spirit upon as we pray tonight. Amen.